Here's what it was like to get my TREMFYA loading dose infusions to treat my Crohn's disease. So, hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So I wanted to talk about what it was like to get my loading dose infusions for TREMFYA that I started to treat my Crohn's disease about 3 months ago. So as I've talked about in the past, I was on Humira to treat my Crohn's disease for about 10 years. And then I got switched around to a couple of different biosimilars for Humira and it stopped working. And because of that, I had to change my medication because I lost my clinical remission. I was just really sick. So when I started TREMFYA about 3 months ago now, I had nausea, abdominal pain. I was having some blood in my stool. I had a fissure that had opened up and just didn't really have an appetite. So I wasn't feeling well. I was on the brink of really a Crohn's disease flare. And so that was really the signs that my Humira, the biosimilar that I had been switched to, which was the second one I'd been on, really just wasn't doing its job anymore. And it was time to unfortunately switch. And so we made the decision to switch to TREMFYA. And so if you're unfamiliar with TREMFYA, it's newer in terms of being approved for IBD. It's approved for ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease now. Ulcerative colitis was approved at the end of last year, and then Crohn's, it was approved earlier this year, but it's been around for a really long time. Has some really good data on it. I mean, patients seem to be responding really well to it. And so we made the decision for me to go on that because of how I've responded to other medications. It is different than Humira in the way that it acts, but the data on it is really, really good. So this was the decision for me. And if you're not familiar, so with TREMFYA, you have a loading dose, which like most biologics, you have a loading dose, but with TREMFYA, it's a little different. For ulcerative colitis, right now, you have to get your loading dose done as an infusion, and it's 3 infusions. So it's 3 infusions over a 3-month period, so once a month for 3 months, and then you switch to subcutaneous injections as your maintenance dose. For Crohn's disease, you actually have the option to do a loading dose with the subcutaneous injection, or you can choose to do the infusion, whichever you would like to do, whatever you feel comfortable with. I was given the option, and I just chose to go ahead and do the infusions because I inject a lot already. I've been on Humira for 10 years, so I was doing a lot of injections, and I also am on injections to treat my hypophosphatasia. And so I was like, you know what, let's just do the infusion. It'll be easier that way. And it's nice to be at an infusion center with nurses there and doctors around for a new medication. And once you finish your infusions, your next treatment, so you have 3, your third one, after the third one, 4 weeks later, you start your maintenance dose of TREMFYA, which is a little bit of a lower dose than you get for the loading dose. And it's just a subcutaneous injection once a month. So it's 1 injection every 4 weeks, which is really nice. Humira was 2 injections a month. And so once you get past the loading dose, you go into your maintenance phase. And so for me, that's where I am. So this past week, I did my 3rd and final TREMFYA infusion. And I want to talk about how I'm feeling, what the experience was like, and what you could expect if you're going to do TREMFYA as well. So again, when I started TREMFYA, I had abdominal pain, nausea, blood in my stool. I had a fissure that had opened up. My appetite was decreasing, so I just wasn't feeling well. And so after the first infusion, the infusion process was really easy. If you've never had an infusion, it's not really, it's the same as like if you've ever had like a bag of fluids really and like the ER or anything like that. And so went in, they gave me my IV, and for me, for the first 2 infusions, I did what they called pre-meds. So I took Tylenol, and they offered Benadryl, which I declined because Benadryl gives me a weird feeling. I get like that overreaction to it. So instead, they actually gave me, I think it was Pepcid in my IV, which is something that can help in a similar way if you were to have some kind of reaction. So again, that's why they do this. They give you Tylenol and some sort of other medication like Benadryl, just in case you have some sort of reaction to it, some sort of allergic reaction, because it is a new medicine. They want to be safe. And so I went in for my infusion, first one, did my pre-meds and all of that, and I had to wait about 30 minutes before I could start my infusion. And then the infusion itself lasted a little over an hour, and then I had to wait 30 minutes after to make sure I didn't have any kind of reaction. And so it was really easy. For me, my infusions are done at my GI clinic. They have an infusion center within the IBD clinic, which is really nice, very convenient. Don't have to go to a hospital or anything like that. And so I went and had it done. I had a nice little room. And so it really wasn't that big of a deal. I talked about my first infusion prior where I did feel really fatigued afterwards. I felt really tired, and I could tell that my body was going through something, going through a new medication and adjustment. And I had a little bit of a headache for a couple of days, and I think a little bit of nausea. It wasn't that bad. I just felt really tired, so I had to rest a little bit more, and just my body was really trying to adjust to the medication. And so that only lasted maybe 2 days, and after that, I felt good. By the time I got to my second infusion, which I haven't talked about, I knew that I could tell at that point that my symptoms were getting a little better. And so the abdominal pain, the nausea was getting better. My fissure that was causing a lot of bleeding was healing. It was almost healed by the time I got to that second infusion. I was taking some medication for that specifically to help, but it was healing by the time I got to that second infusion. But I could definitely tell that I was starting to at least respond a little bit to the TREMFYA because my symptoms and stuff were getting better. And so I had blood work done after my second infusion as well, and my inflammatory markers were fine. I had a little bit of, you could tell that I had a little bit of blood loss. It wasn't like anemic or anything like that, but some of my levels were a little low, they said, but not to a point where I needed any kind of iron supplementation. But my blood work was looking good. And so after the second infusion, I actually did not feel fatigued or have a headache or anything like that. Not really. I think I felt a little fatigued, but it was not as bad as that first one at all. It was very easy. So I got it done. Same kind of routine. I got pre-meds before, waited 30 minutes, got my infusion, took about a little over an hour, and then waited 30 minutes, and I was released. And so second one was super easy. So again, by the time I got to that second infusion, I could definitely tell I was feeling better. And the infusion process was the exact same as the first one. And again, very easy. IV in, got my medication, and left. And so really, that third and final infusion that I just recently had, that's where I could really tell that the medication seems to be working. So in the weeks after my second infusion, I was feeling much better. I wasn't really nauseous anymore. My fissure had completely healed. Abdominal pain had pretty much gone away. My bowel movements had gotten a little better. I personally deal with constipation more than diarrhea when it comes to Crohn's disease because of where my disease is located. And so sometimes I get really constipated. And I still have dealt a little with that. I think some of it is that my body's adjusting to this medication. So I was feeling constipated after that third one. But overall, I was feeling a lot better by the time I got to my third infusion. The only thing I notated in, like, I have to do a little paperwork that just tells my GI team how I feel. Constipation was the only thing that I really notated in that. She did ask me about it, and I said, yes, I've been dealing with some constipation. I don't think it's anything to worry about. I think my body's just kind of adjusting. But for me, that is something my GI team actually monitors, is constipation, because when I was first diagnosed, that was actually one of the signs that something was going on with my intestines, my GI tract, was severe constipation. And so come to find out, when I had all my tests done and they saw where my disease was located in my small bowel, they're like, yeah, it's pretty common for where your disease is located for patients to experience constipation. And so they do monitor that closely for me, and I have had a small blockage before. So, but I don't think, for me, I trust the way that I feel about my body, and it didn't feel and hasn't felt like it's something that is indicating anything is super wrong. And my third infusion was a little different. So they actually did not do any pre-meds at this point. And they said because I'd done fine with the last two, they didn't do any kind of pre-meds for me. So I actually went in, they got my medicine ready, took my vitals, I did my little bit of paperwork, and they did my infusion. And so I was there a lot less time than the last. They did have to stick me 3 times this time. I was not hydrated enough, and I can be a really, really hard stick because, I've had a lot of blood work done, and my veins are just not great, and I get dehydrated really easily with Crohn's disease, and it's really hot here in the South, and so it was just a tough stick. But third try, they got it in and was able to get my infusion going. And so it's been, I think, 5 days or so since I've had my infusion, and I've not had any kind of fatigue. I've not had any headache or anything like that. I feel honestly normal for me, what normal feels like for somebody like me. And so it's been a really, really, honestly, a good experience for me. I've not had any issues with the infusions themselves. They haven't lasted too long. You know, the longest I've really been at the infusion center was about 2.5 hours. And so, yeah, it's been a really easy process. And so I was glad about that. You know, it's been a long time since I've done infusions. I used to be on Remicade infusions after I was first diagnosed, and those were definitely a little different than this. They took a little longer. But overall, this has been a really good experience for me. I am excited that I can tell that my body is responding to the medication. I feel a lot better. You know, I can tell that my clinical remission seems to be coming back, and overall my symptoms are much better than they were 3 months ago. And I think that that's obviously a good sign, but a good sign for things to come. So to recap a little bit, I was feeling pretty sick by the time when I started TREMFYA, and now 3 infusions later, I'm feeling pretty good. The experience was really good. And so if you have questions about the infusion experience, let me know. Again, I did not opt to do the loading dose and via injection. I just preferred the infusion. It was easier that way. So what's next, right? What's next after this in this process of switching to TREMFYA? So as I said, after the 3 infusions, 4 weeks later, typically depending insurance stuff, you start your monthly injections. So it'll be a subcutaneous injection once a month at a little lower dose than you get for your loading dose infusions, and that's your maintenance dose. So I will hopefully start that in about 4 weeks, and I'll share that process with you, show what the injector looks like, how to do it, you know, what I experienced, and you know, continuing to keep up with how I feel over the next 4 weeks. You know, if there's, you know, I try to keep up with things like what if there's any kind of drop off in terms of how I feel as I get closer to my next kind of injection or infusion, right? And so I'll be monitoring that, but I'm excited to get on this maintenance, you know, to be done with infusions, even though it wasn't a really big deal, but to be done and get back to the convenience of self-injecting at home. I enjoy, in terms of a convenience factor, very much enjoy doing a injection versus infusion. If I didn't have a choice, I would do infusions, absolutely. They're just becomes part of life. I will do anything that, you know, really helps keep my disease in check, but it is nice to have the option to do a subcutaneous injection because it's just easy. I can do it at home around my own time. I can travel with it if I need to. And so, yeah, excited to move into this next maintenance phase and hopefully continue to see signs of improvement and get back to 100%. You know, I don't know that I'm 100% back to where I was, but I think I'm very close. And my disease isn't bothering me quite as much, and so I'm very much looking forward to getting back to 100% feeling better. So I will see my GI team in about 3 months from now. So I just to check in and see how my injections are going and all of that, and see what's happening. So again, this is a really easy process so far. I thankfully didn't have a huge delay in terms of getting an approval for it. It took a few weeks, and so I'm hoping I don't have a huge delay in getting any kind of approval for my next injection. I don't want to have a delay in my therapy, obviously, but I'm excited to continue on. So far, that's been my TREMFYA experience. So that was the loading dose phase, and I'm getting ready to move into this maintenance phase, which I will document and talk about. I know that TREMFYA is new for IBD, but there's a lot of patients I know that are on it, so I'd love to hear from other patients who've been on it for a while. And if you're, you know, maybe considering going to TREMFYA, I hope that this is helpful information, and I'm happy to answer any questions. If you're going on Humira or anything like that, happy to answer questions about that as well. Any kind of infusion process, self-injection tips. I've been self-injecting for over 10 years now, and so pretty familiar with it. Any kind of tips and tricks I can share, would love that. But again, I'm excited for where my disease seems to be headed in terms of treatment, and that, you know, I'm doing much better. So thank you for watching. I hope that this has been, again, helpful information. If you have any questions, please drop a comment and reach out. I love to talk about this stuff. I love to support people on their journey. If you have a question about chronic illness, let me know. But thank you all for watching, and I will share the next part of my TREMFYA phase as it comes, and I'll keep you all updated in the meantime. So thank you all. Hope you have a great day, great week, wherever you're at, and I'll talk to you next time.